Israel is facing unprecedented pressure from allies over its war on Gaza. Can they force it to change its ways? The Palestinians struggle to get donated food at the community kitchen in Jabalia, northern Gaza Strip on Monday, May 19, 2025. CNN, after 19 months of pounding Gaza, Israel is now under growing pressure from unlikely quarters, some of its closest Western allies. Their patience has worn thin over Israel's decision to expand the war and, in the words of one Israeli minister, conquer the territory, a move paired with plans to forcibly displace Gaza's entire population to the south and block all humanitarian aid for 11 weeks. The United Kingdom has paused trade talks and sanctioned extremist settlers in the West Bank. Canada and France have threatened sanctions, and the European Union, Israel's biggest trade partner, is reviewing its landmark association agreement with the country. Aid groups have warned that the situation in Gaza is becoming catastrophic, with the United Nations humanitarian chief Tom Fletcher last week calling on the world to act decisively to prevent genocide. Dozens of babies have died of malnutrition, according to Gaza's health ministry, and more than 53,000 people, or 4% of the entire population, have been killed since Israel launched its war following the October 7 terror attacks by Hamas and its allies. The fact that some of Israel's closest allies are now pushing back more vocally marks a major shift in attitude toward the country. The Hugh Lovat, the senior policy fellow at the European Council on Foreign Relations, told CNN that just 2 years ago it would have been unimaginable for Europe to even talk about the possibility of rethinking the association agreement. It was something that was widely seen as a taboo and unrealistic. The agreement, which covers various forms of cooperation between the two parties, including the free movement of goods and scientific collaboration, have been in place for 25 years. The mere fact that this is being discussed seriously today is a sign of not just the increasing frustration, and I think also, let's be quite clear, anger in some European capitals over Israeli actions in Gaza, said Lobat. The Palestinians carried the bodies of their relatives, including children who were killed in the Israeli army airstrike in Deir al-Balah, Gaza, on Wednesday. The punitive steps threatened by the EU and other allies are designed in part to sway the domestic debate inside Israel, where societies are already extremely divided over the war. The government, prompted up by hardliners from far-right parties, is determined to keep fighting in Gaza. But hundreds of thousands of Israelis demonstrate against the war each week, demanding the government agrees the ceasefire deal to release all the hostages still held in the strip. In the opinion poll published by Israel's Channel 12 broadcaster earlier this month, 61% of those surveyed favored ending the war for a deal that secures the hostage release, while only 25% supported the expanded military operation. That notwithstanding, Ali Reed, a legal scholar at Israel's Bar Ilan University who specializes in international trade and EU law, said that external pressure on Netanyahu's government may not have the desired effect. When foreign countries try to interfere in internal matters of another country, especially things that are very dear to them, such as their national security, it usually works as the boomerang, and it actually caused the people to support the government even more, he said. There is a wide consensus in Israel that we want to release our hostages and that we do not want to go back to where we were on October 6th. We don't want to have this threat of Hamas lingering over us, he said. But he added that the moves by some of Israel's allies have made it clear that the window of using military force is starting to close. And maybe if it goes on longer than that, I think it's going to be very hard to maintain normal relations with many countries in the West, he said. Israel has so far brushed aside the threat from its Western allies. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has accused them of offering a huge prize to the October 7 attackers, while Israel's foreign ministry said that external pressure will not divert Israel from its path in the fight for its existence and security against enemies seeking its destruction. This determination to continue may be due to Netanyahu believing that he can, for now at least, rely on the United States for support. And while the moves are diplomatically symbolic, critics expect little to change on the ground for Palestinians. Omar Barghouti, the co-founder of the Boycott, Divestment and Sanctions called the BDS movement, a global campaign aimed at pressuring Israel to end its occupation of a Palestinian land, told CNN that at least Israel's allies totally stop support for Israel. Their actions will yield few results. Short of the total arms embargo and a full suspension of economic relations, Israel is unlikely to change its ways, he said, arguing that Canada, France, and the UK have been complicit in Israel's actions in Gaza by providing it with military intelligence, economic, and diplomatic support. All three countries have a long-standing agreement with Israel that include defense and security cooperation, although the detail of what exactly these contain is unclear. The UK and France have suspended some arms licenses to Israel over the situation in Gaza, but have continued to export military equipment worth tens of millions of dollars to Israel. Canada has said that no export permits on military goods to Israel have been issued since January 8, 2024. Right-wing protesters tried to block humanitarian aid from entering Gaza on May 21st, 2025. Israel's most powerful backer stands by it. As Israel's most powerful ally, the US, has the most sway over Netanyahu and his government, and while some in the Trump administration have criticized Israel over the dire humanitarian situation in Gaza, there has been no indication the U.S. would take any punitive actions against it. It isn't, however, a foregone conclusion that the U.S. will continue to always unequivocally back Israel, Robert said. While I don't see a rupture in relations, clearly the arrival of the second Trump administration has created the interesting dynamic, given the influence of what I would call the America firsters, those in the MAGA world who want to put the US first in everything, and that has to a certain extent also applied to Israel, he said. The US has moved out of step with Israel on a number of issues in recent weeks. It has struck a ceasefire deal with Yemen's Iran-backed Houthi rebels without first informing Israel, unilaterally negotiated with Hamas the release of U.S. citizen Eden Alexander from Gaza, and according to a Reuters report, has dropped its demand for Saudi Arabia to normalize the relations with Israel as the condition for U.S. investment and potential U.S. arms deals. Addressing Israel's criticism over the deal with the Houthis, U.S. Ambassador to Israel Mike Huckabee told the Israeli media that the U.S. isn't required to get permission from Israel to get an agreement that protects its ships. Netanyahu has positioned himself as the master of the U.S. political game and as someone who's best placed to manage and maintain tight Israel relations and to keep any U.S. presidential administration on side. I think seeing some daylight between the Trump administration and the Israeli government clearly puts pressure on Netanyahu, Lobat said. U.S. officials told CNN that the U.S. President Donald Trump was growing increasingly frustrated with Netanyahu, but stressed these frustrations do not amount to the change in posture in terms of U.S. support for Israel, a country which the president continues to view as one of America's strongest allies. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu talks to U.S. President Donald Trump during the meeting in the Oval Office on April 7, 2025. There are signs that some in Israel are worried about the consequences of its actions in Gaza. The leader of Israel's opposition left-wing Democrat Party, retired Israel's General Yair Golan, warned on Tuesday that Israel is on its way to becoming the pariah state. The impact of the pressure from the allies was on display on Sunday when the Israeli ministry announced it would allow the basic amount of food to enter Gaza as it launched its new offensive in the Strip, which Israel says is intended to pressure Hamas to release the hostages held there. Netanyahu conceded on Monday that if a situation of famine arose in Gaza, Israel simply won't receive international support. In a statement posted to Telegram, he added that even U.S. senators who have been staunch unconditional supporters of Israel for decades had told him that images of mass starvation in Gaza would cost Israel as support more of the threat, even if the U.S. wouldn't want, even if the U.S. won't use its leverage to force Israel to change its strategy in Gaza in a more significant way, it does mean Europe cannot put pressure on Israel on its own. Experts say the European Union is Israel's biggest trading partner, accounting for roughly a third of its trading goods. A full suspension of the association agreement between the EU and Israel is unlikely, as it would require unanimous agreement of all 27 EU member states, and several have already indicated they would not support it, including Hungary, a staunch supporter of Israel. He said that under the terms of the agreement, both the EU and Israel can terminate it for whatever reason, or even without giving a reason. The thing is that within the EU, that would require consensus, and that would be very, very hard because there are many countries, many EU member states that will not go along with this, he said. So I think it's more of the threat to pressure on Israel, and maybe they could manage some temporary suspension of some provisions, but to terminate it, I don't think it can happen, he added.